Hello and welcome to the Smells Like Infinite Sadness podcast. I'm your host, Michael Taylor. For those of you who don't know, I run the website, smellslikeinfinitesadness.com. It's a blog covering the best alternative rock from the 80s and 90s up to present day. I'm a proud middle-aged Gen Xer who is still obsessed with the music of his youth and loves to talk about it. And this week, my special guest is Dave Wyndorf, the vocalist and primary creative force behind New Jersey psychedelic rock veterans Monster Magnet. Monster Magnet are back with a better Dystopia. It's their first album of covers. It's out via Napalm Records. It features the band's take on underrated rock gems of the late 60s and early 70s, including tracks by proto-metal acts like Dust, Hawkwind, Pentagram, The Pretty Things, and many more. On today's podcast episode, I talked to Wyndorf about what inspired him to record this album during the pandemic, how he was able to tie in vintage songs to our tumultuous present, what it was like growing up during the dawn of psychedelic rock and metal during the 60s and 70s, what life was like for him during lockdown, and what Monster Magnet have planned for 2021 and beyond, in addition to this album. So check out this latest episode and be sure to stick around afterwards. I'll be playing the band's cover of Dust Learning to Die off the new album. So first off, how's your day going so far?
Pretty good. I actually stayed up super late last night. My sister had like one of the insisted I come to a thing, with like all her friends from the neighborhood and all that kind of stuff. So I guess it's like the first big thing back since everybody got vaxxed.
Yeah.
It was really weird. Yeah. New Jersey, suburban, mid New Jersey, suburban gathering. After all that stuff, and everybody's all like it was weird. Everybody was weird.
It has been weird. I went to a party a few days ago and it felt really, really odd. I felt almost like exposed and strange and just
it doesn't take long, It's like the thin veneer of civilization breaks down. All you need is a little caveman action. You start to revert.
Well, I guess that kind of leads me to my first question, which was it basically during the pandemic. I mean, we're still going through it, but during like the worst phases of it, was that kind of the cabin fever that inspired you guys to get back into the studio? And were you originally going to do original songs, and was it always a plan to do covers, or how did that whole evolve to do the new album?
It evolved because really we got interrupted in the middle of a tour. It was a 2-part tour that was supposed to go the first part in Europe, 3 weeks off, and the second part in America. So we were all like rehearsed for the Powertrip tour, and we had just finished a month or about 5 weeks in Europe, and we just got out of there just in time. And we were there we were in Milan 2 days before Milan went down, so we could see it coming.
Yeah,
it was like it's coming, and so we got shut down, of course. And I was like, well, I'm going to stop playing now. And plus, if it looks like everybody's going to be in lockdown, we're going to lose our minds. This is going to suck. Everybody's going to go fucking crazy. So we got to do something. And rather than make those guys wait while I sat in there writing the next record, because that's what I usually do is write all the songs. I didn't feel like sitting there and writing during a lockdown. What a horrible record would be,
Yeah.
Imagine? It's not very inspiring. Just sitting there. So I was like, let's just do this. So let's do a cover record. And this is the cover songs I want to do.
Well, that was something I was going to ask about too, is doing covers. Was it easier to do that and less stressful versus new material? Because I've kind of talked to several different musicians about this, and some were saying they felt inspired, but most of them felt kind of sapped, just because it was so stressful thinking about things, and even thinking about new songs was just kind of out of the question at this point. But I was wondering if that was kind of where your head was at too.
It wasn't. No, I mean, I guess I could have wrote, but it would take time. And I didn't want to waste the energy that we had got up. Like I said, we're in between 2 tours, and once you get all fired up like that, the band's like playing really good, and everybody's together. It's a band. It like really is a band. So once you get that all cylinders going, I figured it was the best thing to do, record while everybody had their shit together. And I didn't know how bad it was going to be later on. So it was better. And I thought it was just better to get something down. Didn't matter what it was, as long as it was cool. It didn't matter who wrote it. And I had this list in my back pocket for a long time. Anyway, there's always a list of covers in my head. I'm such a record mutant that all I do my whole life has been, man, I wish I wrote that song, or man, I'd love to sing that song. It never ends. So it's no problem where to get. I mean, it hasn't ended since I was like 13. Like, man, I want to do that, and I want to do this. So this thing has been sitting around in one form or another for a long time. Another thing is really, I had to look tactically too. Like, whatever record you release in the pandemic is going to be kind of like a sacrifice to the gods, meaning you can't tour it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to make that much money off it. And since we all know that music was stolen, pretty much thrown behind a paywall by Spotify and Apple Music a while ago, the artist is the last person to get paid for their music. It's a scandal, and it's been that way. But what are you going to do? Like, they quote unquote saved the industry, but music is not worth what it used to. Artists really don't get paid a lot for their music. Publishing deals are small. The only place they have to go is live, and so literally sell T-shirts and tickets to get their money. And it's 21st century madness as far as I'm concerned. But I'm sure you've heard this from other people. But you'll see. They'll be in the future. You'll see these people, class action suits goes against these guys. Steven Tyler and Wilson Pickett went in there and tried to sue them. Anyway, so there's the money, and so if you don't have a new record to promote a tour, it's harder to get people excited about your tour.
Yeah,
the press and all that stuff really wants something to focus on besides just you. Like, okay, Monster Man is going on tour. Well, why? Just because they're Monster Man? Fuck you. Give me a new album. You know what I mean? You and everybody wants to go. So it's important to time this stuff right, at least I think it is. So I just said, all right, well, if we got to throw anything away, sacrifice to the gods something, we'll sacrifice a cover record. That's something that's, not my first instinct to do, but given the songs that were on it and what I wanted to do with it, I thought it was totally the right time to do a project like that. Tie it into the pandemic, throw some history on it, the whole thing, just make this point out my observation of that in my life, I've been through two quote unquote end times. When I was a kid in the 70s, early 70s, the media was just nuts, and it was really crazy. I don't know how old you are, but if you didn't live through it, how old are you?
I'll be 50 into the June. So I'm
okay. So you've heard enough stories, and you're old enough to know, So, but yeah, I mean, there were riots all the time. You know what I mean? Just imagine if what you saw last year when George Floyd thing, but just imagine if that was almost every weekend for like 7 years.
Yeah, civil rights.
And all you got to do is look at history and you'll see it. Things were on fire. Stuff was burning like all the time. I remember in Newark, the town is not that far away from me. It was just on fire, and there were snipers. It was a very, very violent and crazy time. And we had all this shit going on at the same time. Vietnam, the Cold War. I mean, fear of nuclear war was still a huge thing.
Yeah.
It was on people's minds all the time. And acid, Charles Manson. It was bad vibes, really, really bad vibes. After 68, and I turned like 12 in 69. And the whole thing was like, the 60s just went really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything's coming apart. It was kind of cool. And I mean, I was 12, so you know what I mean? I wasn't a grown up. All I knew is that pop culture reacted immediately to it. It was very, very cool. Like, not all pop culture, but music did. TV didn't. Movies didn't. Not till a couple of years later. And all the stuff that happened in the late 60s, the only place you could really see it reflected immediately was in music. Like, if those kids got shot at Kent State, and like 2 weeks later, there's a song called Ohio on the radio, and that just didn't happen back then. You know, I mean, TV would show it on the news, but you wouldn't see TV shows dealing with that shit, you know?
Yeah, they kind of...
And all of a sudden, you know, a rock band could write a song about something that just happened, get it on the radio 2 weeks later, you're plugged in, you know? Really, I mean, you felt like you're plugged in. It's like, okay, this shit's coming out. This is the way it is. The only people that can make an end run around the gatekeepers of culture is music, because music was not considered to be an intellectual property, but just an entertainment property by the record companies. But the kids and the music had advanced to the point where they were an intellectual property. It's just like the old people didn't know it. There's like a secret language, you know? It's like the secret language amongst young people. And it's important to notice that loud music wasn't even, when I was 12, loud music was only about 2 or 3 years old. It was brand new. Hendrix came out in 1967 and turned it up, but before that, it was, yeah, there was Beatles and Stones and stuff, but it was all turned down, half the volume. So it was a crazy world, and it seemed like the music part of it and the culture surrounding it, counterculture, seemed to react to everything that was going on, and they were ahead of everything else. Not even the movies were that cool. You know, there was a couple cool movies, but there wasn't that whole 70s, later 70s, 73, 74, cool, Coppola, Scorsese, and all that kind of movement didn't really get going until a couple of years after. So it was just like a bunch of now aging anti-war activists, and then a bunch of like teens, almost tweens, starting to listen to Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and, you know, and stuff like that. And all the stuff that came out of London, like Jethro Tull and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And it was just like a whole new weird thing. Very cool. And they didn't promote the stuff in mainstream at all. They were only promoted in record companies. They rarely like gave you a heads up on what was coming out. So you had to kind of go to the record store and you'd see these things would come out, these albums. And go, oh, I wonder what this is. You know, I read a shit. Rock journalism was created in 1966. There was no rock journalism before 1966, and this was 1969. So they were making it up as they went along. I loved it. I thought it was going to be like that forever. I remember around 1975 when Kiss came out, I was like, well, it's all over. You could see that it was getting, you know, it was getting more like TV in the movies. You know, when the big business struck and the band started charging more and arena rock and stadium rock started, that was in the mid-70s. But that wasn't the case in the time I'm talking about. It was like a no man's land. You know, it was post-60s activism, but pre-stadium rock and pre-high ticket FM. The FM was still a freak show. It was very cool. I said that word about 9,000 times. I'm trying to better way. It was interesting in a way that in a way that I've never seen before. In meaning that the mainstream was really trying to understand what was going on with music and kids. They were trying. You know, I mean, people would take a step down, like major journalists would go, "What's going on in this rock scene?" You know. The word rock, the word rock was divorced from rock and roll now. That was only a couple of years. You know, the word rock and rock generation was the first time it was used. They hadn't even made up rock star yet. It was like, what's going on in the music scene and what is all this weird stuff? And if you look at the output of, say, between 68 and 73, it's wild. And it's like, it's a renaissance of music compared to what came out before and after. I mean, well, maybe after, but I mean, that's a big sound. It's a big sound change from, say, you know, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs to Court of the Crimson King. That's a big, you know, that's a big vibe change in music, you know.
Big sonic
it
shift.
Like garage rock and Rolling Stones and Beatles riff-offs to these fully fledged, almost concept bands. Like, how do you explain Jethro Tull? Like, where does that come from?
Flute.
You know what I mean? Where does this come from? I mean, they're like young people that look like old people, and they're going, and they're blowing flutes, and they're like, This did not come from the Beach Boys. Where did this come from? Everything else before that, you could see a direct line of where it was coming from. But all of a sudden, after Hendrix and probably Sgt. Pepper and, some other bands, Dylan, all of a sudden people started just making shit up on their own. And the record companies could afford it because the bands weren't asking for a lot of money. This is pre-big rock star days. This was, being in a rock and roll band was not a big money maker. It was decent, but if you're looking, and I've checked all this stuff because I'm fascinated with it. It's like, why was that time so good? They weren't demanding a lot of money. The shows weren't huge. I mean, a festival was huge, but there weren't that many. Woodstock, Altamont, that was a disaster. So it was just this weird little thing, and mainstream culture and intellectual culture tried to go in there and understand what's going on. So that these guys, music itself had a currency, an intellectual currency. And I don't know if it was deserved or not, because, I mean, yes is great and everything, but I don't know if they're going to move the needle on, intellectual quality or anything. But basically they created their own universes that were complete amongst themselves. Much more than a factory line pop machine that had come out before that. So you've got a world where it's not just, here's all the new kid bands. We all know they're dancing to the same beat. They weren't. It was like you got Emerson, Lake Palmer, Yes, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, the Eagles. Everyone's doing different. Sly and the Family Stone. It's different. Everybody had their own sound and stuff. And beneath all that was this really weird kind of throwaway, the guys that didn't make it, old ex-garage punkers and people holding on to psychedelia and pushing it through in this kind of paranoid time of like how I started this with Vietnam and all this stuff, where it was actually possible to, or at least for people to try to really, quote unquote, tell it like it is. I'm sure drugs had something to do with it, but I think it was more just this widening, but just a widening field.
It's kind of like it had
I'm sorry.
I would say it's kind of like it had a few years to be kind of pure, and before people tried to commodify it, it was like a few years of just kind of hitting the.
Exactly right. I mean, it took them. They tried to figure it out, and they couldn't figure it out. Finally, somebody figured it out in around 72 or 73, and I forget the guy's name, but he was a FM programmer he's famous now, famous for saving the radio industry, but actually he ruined. He's kind of like the guy that made FM. He's the guy that gave us Boston. Here's the band Boston, the perfect FM rock band. I was like, no, this is not a good move. You know what I mean? I'd rather have fucking Grand Funk and Black Sabbath on the radio than Boston. But they found a way to make FM more like an AM thing, an album-oriented rock. And that whole party was over. It was gone. I remember I lived through it because I grew up with it in real time. I remember noticing it around 74. It's just the amount of records that are coming out, and the records are weird. There's a lot of soft rock from bands that you didn't expect they were going for hits, FM radio hits. So all of a sudden you got bands like Blue Oyster Cult, which would release 3 unbelievable albums.
Yeah, they're great.
I mean, those first 3 Blue Oyster Cult albums, I don't care what anybody says, those things are fucking awesome. I mean, lyrical content, these guys are singing about old, 1920s pulp detectives. They're mixing in, Nietzsche stuff. They're daring to go towards, fascist rock, World War II, World War I. Really cool music. It's I don't know where you get this, kind of jazzy. Anyway, they're really, really good. And if they would have just stayed with those 3 albums, they'd be considered one of the greatest bands of all time now, I think. But next thing you know, FM rock is in, and they have to write, nothing against Don't Fear the Reaper, but you know what I mean? You could see where they were going.
Yeah.
You could see where everybody was going. If you wanted to survive in the business, you were going to have to get something on FM, the new FM. So a lot of a lot of that kind of stuff started to end and started going for bigger stuff. But I don't know how I got off this one, but I really enjoyed it. Well, I think I'm so on it because that was my time of consciousness raising. You know, your conscious kind of really opens up around 12 or 13 when you're a kid. You're kind of outside your parents' influence.
Mm-hmm.
You start noticing stuff on yourself, by yourself, without anybody, you know, even if you're supposed to be at church or wherever your eyes are starting to go and you're processing all this stuff. And it just happened to be at the time where my eyes, at the time that I woke up, at the time that I was woke, at the time as I was woke, the country was like on its knees, you know, burning, you know. It was like, somebody mentioned that to me. It's like coming into the eighth act of Macbeth, you know, like growing up in the late 60s or coming of consciousness, just like walking in on the eighth scene of Macbeth. Like, what happened here? You know? What's going on? You know, it's kind of military and cops and freaks, and you know, I was like, wow, this is black light, you know, black light posters everywhere. And like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Well, that's one thing I think about the album that Better Dystopia that's so cool is that you kind of hit that sweet spot, like you said, before things got commodified and right when it was kind of this exposure to getting heavier and more experimental. And one thing I like about discovering bands is I love hearing bands talk about their influences and discovering bands I never heard about before. Like a lot of grunge bands told me about the Stooges, so I went back and found the Stooges, stuff like that. And what I like about this album is turning onto a bunch of bands I really wasn't familiar with before. So was it always an intentional decision to kind of pick songs off the beaten path a little bit, or was that kind of how that?
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I know that has its value. I mean, it always did for me. I remember buying compilation albums and being so happy with them, like pebbles and nuggets of songs I had never heard before. That came out in the 80s, which were collections of 1960s garage punk bands, and they were just my favorite thing. I was like, I love these compilation albums. And then there was the Cramps.
Oh yeah.
Like when I was like 18 or 19, I finally started getting into my own bands, which was, you know, into music. The Cramps were around. The Cramps were like a library of that stuff. And they would cover all these obscure songs, and that's how I found out about it. So I figured I was just figuring or continuing in that tradition. So I couldn't really go wrong doing it that way. Like, nobody's going to give me any shit. Like, oh, you fucking douchebag, you know. Like, I'd rather have people go, I don't recognize any of the songs than you did a horrible version of Communication Breakdown. Can you imagine? What are you doing? Guess what? You won't believe it. Dazed and confused. Like, oh my God. And also, I just wanted to make sure that all the songs sounded like they could come off conceivably a Lost Monster Magnet record.
Yeah.
I was like, these things have to be in the wheelhouse. All these songs inspired me to start Monster Magnet in the first place. So, you know, the wheel is complete, my friend. The circle is complete.
Well, what I like too is that you mentioned earlier how you kind of picked the album title and song titles that kind of symbolize what we've been through with the pandemic. How'd you kind of get that idea to tie the past with the present in that way? I thought that was really interesting.
Just because as usual, I'm a big poop, you know, and like, I haven't been happy with music since punk rock died. You know what I mean? I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those guys. I've been complaining like since I was a teenager because of my punk rock. Like I said, this was the music I'm covering now. This is all from me from like 12 to 17, and say 12 to 17 or 18. After that time, when things got weirder, I just gravitated towards punk rock because that was the natural. Like the bands that I'm talking about now, that shit was all gone. Things happened fast back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things didn't. It was not like the internet where the stuff lasts forever. If the record didn't make it, it was forgotten. So it's like a brand new world every year. Punk rock got me into an attitude, introduced me to the attitude and I still agree with it. And it was just like, well, you know, rock and roll was great. The 60s were really good, but like, well, now what do you got? And, you know, what's the next step? And if it's just going to be like prog rock and FM radio, it's going to be more like prog rock and FM radio, then this really, really sucks. You got to do something else. So that's why I went to punk rock, but it gave me that attitude forever. More of a kind of a cynical, like, what do you got for me?
Yeah.
It was up to, in my mind, it was up to kids. It was up to kids and musicians, because musicians were still kids back then. They weren't older guys. You know what I mean? It was not like now. There was nobody like me around. Like if my 18-year self would tell my now self to get the fuck out of the room. You know what I mean? There weren't old people in rock. I mean, the old people were like 35. Rock was too new. It wasn't that kind of situation. It's like, get out. So, yeah, it was like, you're not welcome here. You know, old people suck. You have nothing to say. You can't understand it. I mean, it really was that. I mean, in the 60s, it was like, don't trust anyone over 30. And it's kind of better. You think about all that. Well, you know what I mean? It was cooler, meaning, who knows, it's better, from an artistic standpoint. It's a horrible thing to say, because most people get better when they get older, at one point. But in a truly, in the truest sense of the rock and roll ethic, pure as possible, rock and roll was invented by very young people to sell to other young people. It never, in its wildest dreams, had any plan to sell to anyone over 25.
Yeah, it's definitely youth focused.
It didn't occur to them. It didn't occur to them. And then all the changes, of massive cultural changes in the 60s just cemented that even further. It's like, this is us. We got a way of talking. It's like hip hop was for black kids. Except this was white kids. This is white kids hip hop. Middle class white kids. Smartest kids ever on the face of the planet. After World War II, they got a better education than ever before. And there were lots of them. Half the population was kids. Half the population because of the baby boom. Half, they're like 50-50. And I think for a while it felt like there were more kids than there were adults. Families were like 4 kids, 6 kids, 8 kids. So it was like, this is a kids thing, man. This is the young people's thing. Fuck you guys.
Generational divide.
Long hair was, yeah. It was, and so it was like I say, it was the white kids, middle class white kids early version of their hip hop, secret language, all that stuff, all that hip speak that people make fun of now. That was a real thing. It didn't come from just TV shows and stuff. It was real. Very interesting. And it's really, after it kind of hit the wall, sold out like everything else in America does. I mean, commodify. Then punk rock was seemingly the only answer was to turn in on itself. And I think everyone tried to make punk rock an organic movement, but it wasn't a mass culture movement. It was more like an intellectual movement. Didn't really settle in, didn't take over. It was like, I remember always telling some of my friends that music nuts and nerds like me, like, as we got older, as we hit 30 and stuff, the old age of 30, going, well, so where do you think it's going to go? I was like, it's done. Everything was done by 74. Everything has been done since by 74. From here on in, it's a fucking ka-ching, ka-ching. Anything that's going to happen is not going to happen on a mass culture level. In that kind of spectacular American fashion where the lunatics run the asylum. It's going to be very interesting stuff, but it's going to be in that niche. Whether it be art rock, punk rock, or whatever niche you want to call it. And very few times has it really turned into anything else since then. I mean, cool stuff and great music and stuff, but I've never seen it as a massive pushing the cultural needle or anything. So it's like a one-time deal, I think.
Well, that's what I think is so cool about the songs that you pick for this thing, whether it was like, Dust Waiting to Die or Ready to Go by Hawkwind or Pentagrams Before Warned. All these kind of songs are, you can kind of see they're kind of at the tipping point of, or just like the beginnings of punk and metal. You kind of see where they were kind of headed towards that direction before it actually became those things.
I know, you can hear it in the music, right? Yeah, downstrokes of guitars, just basically starting to, kids starting to realize and put together the energy of previous rock and roll downstrokes and guitar stuff with extra volume and madness, because the time was certainly mad. So why not? And focus in on that kind of emotion, the kind of stuff that would never occur to them 5 or 6 years earlier to have a negative sound. I mean, it was, it never occurred to bands before that to actually incite people to, bang their head or anything. It was like, you always want, music up to that point had been, let's make people happy with it.
The aggression wasn't there yet.
No, and it wasn't just like, well, let's just get, you could feel it was coming, It really did. I mean, I thought it really did mirror society. And I kind of thought it back then, even when I was a kid. I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is kind of the way I feel. And before the days of internet and stuff, it's like you didn't think of writing your own manifesto. Writing, I'm going to go out there, and unless you were some activist politician,
yeah,
you basically express yourself through your music, not yourself. Not like now where you just go and blab 24 hours a day. Sometimes I think words have really pushed art to the side in this world today. Typing in words.
Yeah, because there's that primal aspect you don't want to get too far away from that makes it rock. For it, you kind of want to make it too polite or too explanatory, I guess. There is that rawness.
Yeah, it's strange. Yeah, raw. And I was just writing something about this the other day. It's just like when people have the time, or just in that time in history where people are willing to lean into ambiguous lyrics and try to figure out what was going on in them. If you write really ambiguous lyrics now in pop, they'll throw you out of the club. They're like, why don't you tell me what you mean? I need your motivation. Why are you writing this nonsense? And it's weird. I mean, we just went through 4 years of Trump and a crazy post-truth, whole blah, blah, blah. I mean, it hasn't been like, it's been talked about way enough. I haven't seen it pop up in any kind of real pushback or addressing that in popular music. It's like they want to pretend it's not there or something, or they just don't know how to deal with it.
There's like no protest anthems anymore. They've kind of just, I don't know where they are, but I haven't heard them.
What do you protest? Like the world's, it's like, at least I guess in the old days it was in a monoculture. It was easier to blame like one or the other. Now it seems to be everybody blame the tribe next door. You're wrong. I mean, feminists can't get together. Kids can't get together. Nobody gets together on anything. They're all fighting each other over picking fly shit out of pepper. It's almost like they're just battling because you can, and not enough dream time.
Yeah, it's like
a lot of time for that. And music, while it still can be a very transportive experience, has a lot of competition from modern fantasy elements, such as movies and stuff. And movies got a lot better at creating fantastic worlds that can't be replicated without billions and billions of dollars. And music, of course, used to be able to do that with just $30,000. You listen to "Fragile" by Yes, and you're in Yes land.
Mm-hmm.
In your head, you're in a multi-million dollar. If that was a movie, you'd have to get Roger Dean to do the movie, and to paint all these things. It's just a whole different world. There's competition now for people's dream time. So it seems to me like a lot of the art, at least the mass art, mass culture, likes their art as an adjunct to their feeling. It's like, here's my favorite song, and this is what I mean. But it's definitely not like, where's the music going to take us? It's like, how can I use the music to bolster my my opinion? I suppose it was inevitable.
Yeah, it's like I keep waiting for some kind of resurgence to come back, and it's just not happening, at least not yet. But you kind of hold out hope that
it's going to happen in some weird way that you and I will probably be against it. That's when you'll know it's right.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know, man. I don't understand what those kids are doing. It's uncool. It'll be like three bald children, like 9-year-old children, using mental telepathy in the desert, just beating on a bongo and speaking Esperanto, and somehow it'll be like a computer virus that goes into everything. Oh no! It's like, there's a new rock and roll. And we're like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Well, kind of a flip side of the other songs I mentioned was "Death" by the Pretty Things, and that's probably my favorite song on the new album because it's so unique and kind of understated. It's somber.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, it's kind of
what a fucking song.
It's kind of different for you guys in that respect. Was that a fun one to tackle? And was that kind of shift in tone intentional? Since that was kind of the lone, not really a ballad, but the lone.
Absolutely. It needed a breather. The record needed a breather. I always look at records as like it's a destination. There's a destination. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. With a couple little bus stops here and there. So we needed something to break up the loud rock. And I love little songs. I mean, I've been writing tiny little drumless songs forever on Monster Man records. They're all over the place, usually at the end of the records. Songs with no drums, just big vocal and weirdness. So this one fell into that category. So the Pretty Things were like this amazingly, underrated, I think, band. They did lots of stuff in the 60s. At the same time, the Beatles were doing it, making up cool concept records and stuff. And they had this song "Death," which I just thought was the coolest thing in the world. So what a mood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the whole thing. It's like a funeral drum in the back. You can just see the guy walking along and bringing the coffin down from the graveyard from some poor old bastard that died in Fish on Gloucester or whatever English place you want to make up, man. He lived a good life, and now he died and cast on trout. And now his grandchildren look. In the original, on the original thing, the guy's like, he's like 18 years old singing the song. So he's got this beautiful, high-pitched, non-cigarette voice. So I figured the best way to do it is just do it from the old guy's perspective, let him hear the cigarettes and let him hear the age in the song to make it creepier. Add a little fuzz to it, make it a little bit more menacing, but not fuck with. I don't want to fuck the originals too much. The original songs are really bizarre and cool, and that's my favorite song on the record too. It's fun to make. It didn't take long either.
It's got a really cool atmosphere to it that almost kind of like pre-goth. It's that real kind of sinister, dour feeling to it. So I really like that one.
I swear, man. I mean, if you go deep diving through the late 60s and early 70s, you could honestly, you'll bum yourself out, and then you'd be like, well, what really was all done. So in that time, so many people touched. Maybe they didn't capitalize on it, but they touched on almost everything that came after. Somebody was touching on something that came after, like you said, proto-metal, proto-goth, whatever you got. Put a proto in front of it, you'll find it. Very interesting. I think one of my favorite times in music for adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the quality of the music, but I can think of a more adventurous time.
Kind of like an anything is possible kind of vibe out there, where I
think that people believed it too, because they were going, like I said, they were making an end run around the gatekeepers. Just imagine if you could, like people make end runs around gatekeepers all the time now with YouTube sensations and viral videos. But the only thing that stops it from being the next big thing is that there's a million people behind it doing it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So we can't have the rock and roll thing like we had last time, because the rock and roll thing was at that sweet spot where the media was fast, but they weren't that fast.
Yeah, it was oversaturated.
Came up with oversaturated, and there's just too many acts, and going so fast that nobody can pay attention that fast. But back then, there was a belief, that you could have something like if you could, a few years before, the real people, the heavyweights that moved the needle, Bob Dylan could make lyrics the most important thing on a record. that was impossible to, ever think that people would do that. It's like, what do you mean? Where's the beat? How are people going to dance? Like, no, well, this guy's like a poet. It's like, poets don't belong here. It's like, we don't want poets in rock, but he did it. So there's people that were listening to other stuff, rock, and were also like leaning in, listening to a guy speak. And then the Beatles started doing stuff in rock and roll music that just wasn't done, bringing elements of classical and Indian music and all this stuff. So it became a heavier deal, more literary. And then they started treating albums as the truest meaning of an album. It's a collection of things sequenced in a way to bring you through chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It was a massively new, almost unthinkable concept at the time this stuff came out, and it set the bar for everybody forever. It's kind of lost the plot since then, but I know I sound like a wistful, like non-forward thinking musician, but I can't go. Every time I want to go back to the well on something, it's like I go back to those days because there was people did think there was a possibility for that stuff to last. And again, that's what I mean about the Dylan thing. Media moved fast enough to carry your message around the world, but slow enough for you to actually be a thing. It caught on, at a good pace. A couple of TV appearances, a lot of build up to record stores and tours, and you were entrenched for a while.
Yeah,
at least a good 2 or 3 years. Now it's like, man, you can have stuff that would blow Dylan and Beatles sales away in one day, and it's gone by the end of the week.
Yeah, there's very little shelf life anymore. Just kind of moved on to the next thing. There's not too much competition to have your own lane, I guess, in some ways.
I wonder how it's all going to pan out. Like there's got to be. It would certainly be possible for it to be the greatest time ever. We've got all the tools for it to be. It's like a weird Star Trek episode. I'm trying to figure out the end of it. And then where did they do to fix, and everything was great, except everyone started acting like children and yelling and screaming at each other. How long did the argument last? 25 years. Like, no. Humanity argued with itself at full volume for 25 years? Fuck me.
Well, I think that's one of the things too that makes a better Dystopia so great is that you did pay attention to the sequencing, and it even though it's covers, it feels like it flows like a regular album, like it goes together. And like you said, it still sounds like you guys. It sounds like Monster Magnet. If you didn't know any better, you would, like, for me, if I had just heard this album without knowing the influences or researching them, I'd be like, oh, this is new Monster Magnet stuff, which is, I think, a kind of a compliment to how you guys absorb that. But I was curious if doing these covers inspired any new songwriting ideas or change in approach to how you guys play. Did that have any effect like that?
Yeah, I'm sure it's gonna, because I got outside of my comfort zone for singing, so I was like, man, what the fuck? You got lazy in the last couple of years. I remember writing the last record, and the last record I did, and then I wrote it, and I remember writing, getting the keys together. I was like, yeah, okay, I can handle this. I can go up and down in this key and sing. They weren't that much different from my normal keys, but I think definitely somewhere along the line, I kept thinking about making the key of song in a spot where I could deliver at 100% quality at every step in the song. And these songs were outside of my comfort zone, so I had to sing outside of quality zone. So I had to try harder. And as I listened to the vocals back, I was like, I like this guy better than that guy. Just looking at me as the singer. I'm like, what's the difference between this song and that? So it's not the song. And I'm like, why does the singer sound different? Because one guy's trying harder. So that's what it really taught me. It was like, take more chances.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, sing outside, shred the voice, fuck it up. Like, what do you got to lose? It's not like I'm 64 years old, for fuck's sake. It's not like I have to go out there. You know what I mean? I gotta sing this song in 50 years. It's like, I'm sure that's what Led Zeppelin did. Like, oh my God. Poor Robert Plant, when he's 18, he's like, how am I going to sing Communication Breakdown when I'm 30? He couldn't.
That's why he won't reunite with them, I guess.
Yeah, There was a lot of considerations, but yeah, I learned from that, and plus the guys, and we all learned that in as far as making careful considerations around making albums, sometimes the careful considerations should be made after. Some of the careful considerations should be made not too early, but you've given the material, whatever that would be, whether it be a song I wrote or a song that the Cavemen wrote or whatever, and just fucking hit it without much consideration is whether we could pull it off or whether we could do it exactly, but whether we can make it exciting as possible and sometimes short as possible. So it taught me it brought me back to like a little pop ethics of brevity and then just pure human ethics of like, how do you want to voice the sound? Like, I tend to sing more than growl. I mean, I growl, I sing, but I'm an old time singer compared to modern metal guys. I mean, those guys don't. It's either with modern metal, it seems to either be it's a bluesless affair. Let's just say,
yeah, Cookie Monster vocals, which is
Cookie Monster, but then like this really like me, to prove that they can not just do Cookie Monster, they'll have a little
emo
part.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little emo. Yeah, a little emo. You got it. You know what I'm talking about. It's like little emo, little thing. Okay, maybe put a girl in there. Okay, that'll make it nice. And but there's no blues.
Why is that, do you think?
I don't know. It's like the embarrassment of the fucking world to me.
It's weird.
I mean, that's why modern metal is not cool. And people get me mad. Monster Mag's been in the metal ghetto now for 30 years. I didn't ask to be put there. Nobody asked me. Hey, we'll put you in the metal section. I was like, what? I was like, what do I got to do with fucking Slayer? I've got nothing to do with this. Nothing against you guys, but it was like, but anyway, so I've been dealing with it, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just like a white kid thing. It's very, very syncopated and not lazy. I mean, it's not Sabbath. It's like all the good rules from Sabbath, all these bands forgot. The jazzy, the lazy, heavy. And I mean, tight enough, but not tight, so fucking tight that it's like a pneumatic drill. I think maybe and it's hard to say what modern metal is because there's so many subgenres, but let's take the modern metal thing now, which I call fantasy metal.
Yeah.
Which is basically all these concepts of, I don't know who started this shit. Iron Maiden a million years ago, but we're going to sing a song about the wall and the great fantasy wall that was built. It's like Game of Thrones metal.
Mm-hmm.
And guitars sound weak, like they're made out of plastic, and there's a lot of synthesizer in there. What? Where's the rock? It's very impressive. It's impressive live, but like I said, there's no blues influence. And it's not like I want to sound like Muddy Waters, but I want to sound like a human.
Yeah.
Not a Broadway. It's like I'm not a Broadway guy. So there's that. And I think that's another reason why, songs like this, I think most of Monster Magnet was kind of based in blues and garage rock and early metal. Big difference between that and what the overwhelming metal crowd wants. It's always put us in a weird position, kind of a fourth dimensional situation, which I don't mind being in because I kind of knew it would be that way anyway.
Well, that's what makes you guys unique. I mean, I would expect nothing less than cover albums of stuff that's not your traditional cover stuff. That's what makes you guys Monster Magnet and why you've got such a hardcore fan base that gravitates towards that stuff, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the people that get it are like really, 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 really cool, and I love them. They're usually big music heads. You talk about music history and talk about interesting phenomena that happen in music that maybe wasn't on the radar at all, and it's so much more fun to go deep diving for this stuff. It makes it seem new, You know, it's like music always seems new and fresh if you go deep diving for stuff rather than go back to the exact same well every time.
Mm-hmm.
And since there isn't any real new music, you know, there hasn't ever been. It's just a matter of juxtaposition of one style against the other, or lyric against chord, or a different way to record the drums, or it's kind of different sound, a different vibe. It's always my job to make sure that it's coming from people. You know, that there's a voice behind this. You know, kind of speak it sometimes, kind of yell it. I mean, just like all the songs on this record have that kind of thing to it. You know, that the vocalists on the record have a personality. You know, they're singing like kind of old school, but sometimes they'll speak and, you know, croon or whatever. Fun, really fun to do.
Well, I guess now that, you know, we're slowly, you know, vaccinations are getting put out there and there's talk of live music happening again. Have you guys figured out if you'll be doing any more touring, or are you still kind of waiting and seeing? Or
I'm ready to go. I'm totally back. So I'm like, put me in, coach. You know, like, let's fucking go. But there's also a huge line. You know, it's like every band in the world wants to go out.
Yeah.
So my target would always be Europe first, because I've always done Europe first for years and years, because Europe is just a way more welcoming attitude towards the kind of music we do, you know, in America. And but unfortunately, Europe is slow on the vaccine draw, you know, so because it take them a while. And what I can see now, all the shows that are coming up now are mostly festivals in the States. Right? Didn't they just announce like a huge amount of festivals this week?
Yeah, Riot Fest and Psycho Las Vegas.
Lollapalooza,
yeah.
Right, Psycho Las Vegas. And so I know I've got a tour booked for next summer in Europe, and that should go. And I'm going to try to get something to fill in, maybe starting this fall, if I can go in there. I'm ready. I know we're probably going to do a couple of anniversary shows of Spine of God, which is our first album. And that's like 30, I can't believe it's 30 years, but yeah, it's been 30 years since our first real album. So we'll probably do a couple of shows celebrating that around Christmas time.
I'd love if you guys can make it down to Texas at some point. I know that's not always easy to do.
I wish. Yeah, I want to go to Texas. I love playing Texas. Texas has always been one of the greatest places to play. Because Texas has just got it all. It's got you freaks. It's got it's like a really significantly different place. It's almost like a different country.
Yeah.
You know?
It is.
Where are you playing? The States plus Texas.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you think?
Well, that's what makes it cool. You know, that's what makes it cool. It's like you never know. You know. We'll get there. I mean, I just don't know how soon. Maybe, perhaps in the wintertime. If I can get something before this, before the summer shows in Europe, I can get something in the winter. We had stuff like we canceled the Powertrip tour, so that was still on the books for the longest time. That we were going to do this tour celebrating Powertrip. Although with this record now, of course, all I want to do is these songs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm dying to get these songs. I think this will make a great set, a live set. You know, all this shit.
Do you guys have any new music in the works too, or you kind of got to take your time on that, or?
Yeah. I started writing a bunch of songs, and typical my fashion. A bunch of them don't really fit anyway. They're really bizarre, and so some of them show up on the record. Probably some of them just go in the weirdo dump. I tend to write mellow songs more than ever. You know, I mean, after 30 years of writing, you tend to all right. If I fucking do these chords one more time, so it takes me a while to gear up to stuff that would be more of a the Monster Man aficionados idea of a Monster Man record. So I'm starting to write now, and there's heavy stuff and there's other stuff. It's not a record yet, though. So I'll be writing, and maybe that'll come out next year. But if I get booked all next year, if I could just tour next year and just say adios to all this shit, I'd do it. The touring thing is a very, very addictive lifestyle. It's hard to explain to people. once you make the commitment to tour and do that, your whole attitude changes towards life in general. Like time moves differently. You're kind of outside of time. Your job is, you get a restart every day. Your only job is to make people, reasonably happy, or do something that affects people in some sort of way and get it back from them. So you get to walk out and actually see real humans. You do what you do. You see humans, they look at you, you look at them. And then if you didn't do your job, it's like, oh, that wasn't that great. Oh, well, thankfully we can have another, we have a do-over tomorrow. And that doesn't happen in normal life. It's a great way to live. Cool.
Yeah, well, plus it's the lifeblood of your operations, too. I know this has been so stressful for musicians not being able to play out. It's been probably maddening, so I'm glad to see that it's starting to come back slowly but surely. So,
yeah. That's going to be, I would imagine live music's going to do better than ever for at least a couple of years after this.
Yeah, I would hope so, too, because there's people are ready, I think, beyond ready to get out of the house and listen to something and see people.
Riot. Go out and riot. No, yeah, they want to see something. They want to see other people living. Smell the stink. Smell each other. Mate. I want to go outside and mate. Yes. Please go outside and mate. It has to be done. I keep trying to think there's not really another time in history where so much stuff got shut down. So, but not in this country. I mean, yeah, in World War II, when you're bombing the living shit out of people and everyone stays in their houses and hides. But aside from that, I don't think there's ever been any organized, pull out of society. I mean, if you could say that with the internet, if it wasn't for the internet, half of us would to have killed each other by now. But yeah, it's a new one on me. Can you imagine without the internet?
Oh no. Yeah, that was the life.
National cabin fever. What did you do? What did you do during the whole thing?
Well, I worked at home, which was good, but I'm glad I had that option. But it was stressful, especially trying to take care of a 5-year-old while working. And
oh my God, 5 years old! It was man, if I could tap the energy of a 5-year-old, I'd be fucking king of the universe.
Exactly. Exactly.
Do whatever they want, and they sleep whenever they want. They just go 150 miles an hour, and then fuck you. I'm just going to charge the battery and come back at you.
It is. Yeah, they say youth is wasted on the young, and I get it now. If I had the energy that I had back then.
George Bernard Shaw. You ever read George Bernard Shaw? You should read him. He's a fucking prophet. He's the guy who said that and said a lot of things cooked. It's this is the big cosmic joke. This is the joke that the universe plays on us. Well, you're going to have all the energy to do the coolest stuff, but you're going to be dumb as a box of rocks. And as soon as you get smart, we're going to unplug your battery. So you're not too dangerous.
Is that? Yeah, that's definitely it.
Yeah, fuck. God damn it. Yeah, the only person that seemed to have who've belied that law is Donald Trump, who must be on steroids or something. That was the greatest performance of fucking just outrageous energy I've ever seen on television in my entire life.
It was bizarre.
I mean, never.
It would have killed
once.
Yeah, other people to be in that amount of stress, and he seemed to thrive off of it, which was distressing.
Well, because he's the ultimate comic book villain. It's I don't know. He's not going to stop. It's he doesn't have the weakness of embarrassment or knowledge. He's a crazy, just a mutant. and he got in. It'd be one thing if he was just some fucking crazy entertainer. It was where he should have stayed. But all of a sudden, this guy's a leader of the free world. I'm not stopping. I would get exhausted watching him. It was the most bizarre fucking thing I've ever seen. It was like a television show for me.
Yeah,
watching him.
I feel like my mental health is far better now than it was when he was there. Just I don't have to hear him every day to be a part of my psyche every single day. He was just hell bent on being in people's lives because of his narcissism. I'm just so glad to have some quiet from it, at least for a while.
absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing what he did to everyone. And it's hard to look away when the guy's, like I say, he's a leader of the free world. And nobody and everybody fell to his spell, whether it be, some sort of weird representation for a lot of people's irks over their lives, and whether all of it unjustified as far as I can say. You know what I mean? I know you got it bad, but it's not that bad. It's America, It's like you're making this shit up. You're making this shit up in your head. You're just mad because you think it's going to be fucking hip hop nation in 50 years. They're basically just scared. Scared white people. They're like, let's see, we fucked these people over for 200 years. Payback's going to be a bitch. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible. And in their minds, they really think it's going to be, yo, what's up? Hanging from their feet. Because they can't see it through any other lens than the way the black people were treated. I'm sure it's in their mind, like someday I'm going to be hanging upside down. There's going to be a cross on my lawn. And it's going to be all these people of color like, we're going to get you back. Never would believe that people would be really that
stupid.
out of touch. Yeah, like out of touch with progress, like world progress and something. I thought we were headed in the right direction. And the next thing you know, no, there's more stupid people than you ever even thought existed.
Yeah. It was this, yeah, it was an eye opener, and it's still blows me away and disturbs me that there's so many of them out there.
Right. It's not over yet, but the thing is that these guys are going to die. You know what I mean? They're in an age group where most of the people, it's not, of course, it affected a lot of young people too, but the future is, a practical, probably more of a practical and more boring society than you and I have known. Because I don't think the culture will be so correct that it won't be as fun. But it won't be as volatile. But once these people of a certain age, people my age, these guys are baby boomers that, like, I can't believe the same guys I went to see Pink Floyd Animals with are now like riding around in a pickup truck.
It is weird.
Shooting. Like, imagine. What are you going to do this week, honey? I'm going to go out in a pickup truck and shoot pepper spray at a bunch of demonstrators. I'm going to stir up some shit. What are you doing it for? I don't really quite know why. I'm going to live out my movie fantasies. Wow. But, after these guys are gone, it's going to be like all the kids you see. Those people in charge, they don't want shit. They just want to, do their thing. So I'm sure it's going to calm down quite a bit. There might be a couple last stands, like I think Trump was like a certain culture's last, one of their last stands. We're going to make a last stand. My big problem now is not looking like them because I'm that age. And I look at myself in the mirror before I go to the store, and I was like, I look like one of those guys that fucking stormed the Capitol. What can I do? I just trimmed this beard. Really? I mean, seriously. I was like, people are looking at me funny. This used to be a sign of like rebellion and pride. Now I look like one of these fucking douchebags.
Well, you don't have to worry about that.
Nah.
Well, Dave, as always, I appreciate it. You're always a pleasure to talk to, and
thanks, man.
I look forward.
How's the kid?
Kid's good.
How's your 5-year-old?
She's good. Man. She's been in daycare now for 3 weeks, so it's some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah, I remember having a 5-year-old daughter, and she was the most magical thing I had ever seen. And still to this day, I don't think I ever had a better or more confounding time. Confounding, but in a good way. Meaning, like, who is this creature? Like, what is this? And why does it look like me? Who is this thing? Why does she look like me?
It's really,
really cool,
really trippy. But yeah, It's an experience, that's for sure. I waited late to have a kid, so the age is I have to have my energy recharge all the time, but she definitely helps. So
she'll definitely help you. You made the right decision. You don't want to do it too early, not in this world. Maybe in the old days, but it's like the older you get, the more you really appreciate it. You're not going to forget stuff.
Yeah,
younger people do. They forget all the good stuff. This will all be lodged in your memory. That's usually the funniest stuff you've ever heard in your life come out of these strange little creatures.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Who are you? Who are you becoming? My brain is growing, Dad. Ah!
I know they say stuff, and you're just like, how is that? Where did you get that from? How did you regurgitate that? It's really weird.
I wrote them all down. I was quoting her all the time at that age. 5 was just psychedelic. They're still psychedelic at the point. They're saying, it's so great. I know everything, yet I know nothing.
Very true. Very true.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Nice talking to you again.
You too. And best of luck with the new record. And I hope to see you guys in Texas sometime in the next few years. That's my fingers are crossed.
Oh, yeah.
So.
All right. Take care, Michael.
All right. You too. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks again to Dave Wyndorf for taking out the time for this interview today. It's always a pleasure getting to hear him talk and give his take on things. You can order the band's latest album, A Better Dystopia, wherever records are sold, including the Amazon link, which you can find on my website, smells-like-infinite-sadness.com, for the blog link to this podcast episode. You can keep track of all things Monster Magnet via the group's website at zodiaclung.com. And as promised, we're closing out today's episode with the group's rendition of Dust, Learning to Die. So take a listen and see what you think. And until next time, stay safe and stay sane.